All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to On the Park Bench, a public square conversation brought to you by the Congress for the New Urbanism. On the Park Bench presents interactive conversations with thought leaders in new urbanism and allied industries, providing an opportunity for the audience to engage in real time. This webinar series is a platform for CNU members to engage, debate, and collaborate on pressing issues of the day. If you have thoughts or ideas, you can share your thoughts on the Park Bench at www.tinyurl.com/OTPB-feedback. And join us for our upcoming webinars. Next week will be our second webinar in our Freeway Fighters series. Freeway Fighters Pushing Back Against Freeway Expansions is on July 12th at 12 p.m. Eastern and features freeway fighters from Shreveport, Louisiana, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Southern Indiana, opposing freeway expansions that damage their cities and towns and regions. They will discuss strategies and what campaigns can learn from one another when a planned freeway threatens to tear a community apart. And you can register for that at cnu.org/resources/ontheparkbench. And now for today's webinar. So first we have Scott Townsend. He is an architect and planner that has a passion for invigorating neglected and underserved communities, neighborhoods, and building through collaborative design planning processes. He and his team have created mixed-use, adaptive reuse, and affordable housing environments and neighborhoods, and have won awards for them at the local, regional, and national levels. Scott is the founder of the Albany Riverfront Collaborative, which formed a little over a year ago. He is married to his lovely wife, Sarah, and together they have 5 children who are now wonderful young adults. We also have Sean Haney. He is the Director of Communications for Rethink 35. Originally from New Jersey, he moved to Austin, Texas 5 years ago and joined Rethink 35 originally as a volunteer in 2021. And we have Scott Banjukian. He is an urban designer by day and community activist by night. With degrees in planning and architecture, he is passionate about adapting our cities for the challenges of climate change, housing affordability, and social justice. As part of that, he studied Lidding I-5 for his graduate thesis at the University of Washington, and today it is a real project with growing momentum. And I'm Lauren Mayer, Communications Manager at CNU. And I wanted to give a little background on the campaigns that are going to be featured today. The Albany Riverfront Collaborative engages the complete community in the creation of an equitable, sustainable, beautiful, forever vision and the initial iterative steps towards this vision. The ARC will forge the robust civic partnerships necessary to nurture a river-connected and sustaining community with a vibrant and interdependent economy, culture, and landscape. Rethink 35 is an all-volunteer grassroots campaign aimed at stopping the Texas Department of Transportation's plan to expand I-35 up to 20 lanes through Austin. They are recruiting community support to convince local leaders to demand exploring alternate community proposals. Their proposals include rerouting the interstate around the city using existing highway facilities and redeveloping the current I-35 right-of-way as an urban boulevard through the city. Lid I-5, with scarce land and a booming population, downtown Seattle has few options for creating new public spaces besides lidding I-5 and building off the success of Freeway Park. That park opened on July 4th, 1976. The current grassroots effort began in 2015 and achieved a milestone in 2020 with a feasibility study that proves lidding more of the concrete canyon as possible. The Lid I-5 group is working with government officials and a local coalition to chart the next steps. So we will start off with a brief presentation from all 3 presenters, followed by moderator questions. We will then do an audience Q&A, so be sure to use the Q&A function to ask your questions as they occur to you. And with Scott, can you please start us off with telling us a little bit more about the Albany Riverfront Collaborative?
First of all, welcome to everybody, and thank you for inviting me and the Albany Riverfront Collaborative to this great discussion. I just want to start off by saying I'm really looking forward to hearing from Scott and the Seattle movement and Sean, and Austin. So it's really nice to be part of this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a video that we put together. That's just a few minutes. And I want to give credit to Darren Baranski and Dan Conley, who put this together with the help of a lot of people involved. And a fun piece of trivia to start it off is we were honored to be selected to be at the Urban Cinema in Poland for the UN World Urban Forum. It was featured there, and it was the longer video, not this one. So I encourage anybody to go and take a look at it if you want on our website. But with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a screen and I'm going to show you our video, if I can find it. Oops. And just want to make sure we're all set up. There we go.
Like so many cities across the United States, Albany, New York built massive highways in the heart of downtown. Over 7,000 people were removed for the construction of the highway and the state government office complex, the Empire State Plaza. Since then, Albany's population has shrunk by almost 25%, and it has become evident that Albany's highways are overbuilt.
Cities are interesting places because they have vibes. And Albany's vibe is an odd mix of these huge, towering bridges that, if you're on the street, are overwhelmingly belittling.
Currently, 787 cuts Albany off from the Hudson River and severs downtown from inner city neighborhoods. The Albany Riverfront Collaborative has taken the first serious consideration of the future of this highway and has helped our community visualize what 787 could look like if it were transformed into a boulevard.
And as someone who's an architect, a designer, you know, we always reflect and look back at work of other designers, architects, city planners, and we learn what works and what has not worked. And I think those planners who laid out 787, if they had the opportunity of 2020, they may say, hey, we could have done this differently.
The Albany Riverfront Collaborative now joins over 60 other movements across the country to transform inner city highways to boulevards.
There's a lot to this project. Obviously, it's a big, complex project. We pulled together a group of urban designers and concerned citizens and business people and people in the community and leaders. What we created was something that says it certainly can be this. And we're trying to help people to get beyond looking at what's there and looking at what the future could hold. And we all need to start getting on that bandwagon that what is there is not a matter if it will be gone, it's a matter of when it will be gone.
The best thing about design is when you design for the people you're designing for. We've been speaking with neighborhood associations, we're doing community meetings coming up, and the focus of those meetings is not to say, here's what we're planning for you, but to say, here's an opportunity to have an impact on reconnecting your community to other communities and to the riverfront, and what would you like to see that be? There's no way to do that without involving the communities.
Albany is not alone. When you look at a city, they're complex. But the first ingredient to any city is people.
Well, hopefully that 3-minute video gives you a good overview of what we're doing. And obviously, a lot of people that are on this call and looking in have probably not been to Albany. Albany is the capital of New York, obviously. It's about, to give you a little bearings, it's about 2.5 hours north of New York City. We're about 3 hours west of Boston. It's a central area, but as the video shows that we have shrunk over time. And when this was done during the Robert Moses time, and it was way overbuilt, as we know, and I'm talking to the preaching to the choir right now. And so what we decided to do is the tough part about our challenge, every place is really challenging, is that we needed to get everybody on board, because the city of Albany has a state capitol in it, and the state capitol tends to hover over everything. So we wanted to make sure that we got a lot of momentum. What we did is we've been together for about a little over a year now, and we worked behind the scenes and got everybody together and created a big collaboration. All of these people that were thought leaders and community leaders and people that were really concerned. And we made sure we didn't launch before we were ready. We wanted to get everything in order between the renderings, between all the data collection that we had to do. And then we came out ahead of it, because the one thing that we've learned and seen is that, and it's local, but it's probably true universally, is that what ends up happening at times is that you come out and say that you're going to do something, and it's easy to shoot it down if you don't have anything backing it up. So that's what we really did. For about 6 months, we stayed behind the scenes, and then we came out, launched everything, fully visualized and fully thought out data-wise. And we had, at that time, we had a little bit over 30 members and collaborators. Now we're over 60, but we have hundreds of people supporting us and working with us, and thousands of people working behind the scenes. And we're blessed because upstate New York, Rochester and Syracuse are progressive. And so the ethos of the politics of New York is to get these done. So we're blessed by that. So like I said earlier, I'm looking forward to hearing from Scott and Sean on the other cities, and I'll leave it at that. And I know there'll be some Q&As, and I'm looking forward to that. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott. All right, Sean, if you want to talk a bit about Rethink 35, please.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm Sean Haney. I am the Director of Communications for Rethink 35. We're based in Austin, Texas. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and share with you a little bit of history about I-35 in Austin, a little bit of information about the I-35 expansion project that we're opposing, and a little bit about the Rethink 35 vision that we want to bring to our city. All right, and this is us. We are Rethink 35. We're an all-volunteer grassroots organization based in Austin, Texas that just started about 2 years ago. We did not start as this big, robust organization at first. It started with a vision. We're just a bunch of local neighbors who, didn't like what we were seeing going on with a highway expansion, and we all have a common vision for wanting a better city for ourselves, and it just started there and took off. So at the end, our proposal, we'd love to see I-35 turn into a boulevard, which is not exactly a radical proposal for Austin, because back in the 20th century, where a noisy interstate was a boulevard. It was called East Avenue. It was this wide tree-lined street that had open lawn areas. The community would gather there. Local colleges and high schools would have their graduation ceremonies in the middle. And it was just a big asset to the city. It wasn't made for cars. It was designed for people. Now, unfortunately, East Avenue did have a part in some of Austin's uglier part of its history. Back in 1928, Austin introduced their city plan, which redlined people of color onto the east side of the city using East Avenue as the dividing line. Even though it was divisive on paper, in person, East Avenue was still a welcoming place where both sides of the city could come together. However, in the 1950s, the Texas Freeway Commission, which is now known as TxDOT, started construction of a highway that later became known as I-35 down the wide right-of-way of the boulevard, which is now today a divisive interstate highway that is impossible to cross. And it just further dug into that scar, the racial scar that divided the city. Now, over almost 70 years later, Traffic is terrible. Austin has grown way bigger than it ever was in the 1950s. So instead of reworking that, TxDOT has unveiled a plan which they claim will alleviate traffic by expanding the interstate lanes and frontage roads to this 20-lane behemoth that you see here, right smack dab in the center of the city. We know that simply adding lanes is not going to work. Time and time again, we've seen highway expansions, including I-10 in Houston, which they expanded to over 26 lanes in 2011, and traffic has increased, not decreased. Basically, this is a 20th century plan for a 21st century city. The expansion would increase the existing footprint of the highway and require eminent domain to demolish over 200 businesses and housing units, including affordable housing. And this is in the midst of a city's housing crisis and, of course, a climate crisis. What is the Rethink 35 proposal? Well, first, the plan that TxDOT is proposing doesn't have to stand. There are already existingly built highways that run around the city, not through it, as it is in already 14 other cities in Texas. Our plan is to take it up a notch and expand this bleak, polluting highway with a human-centered, tree-lined urban boulevard, like you see here. Instead of having 20 lanes of cars that are impossible to cross, we could have maybe 2 or 4 lanes of cars, in addition to rapid bus lanes, bike lanes, wide sidewalks, and tree-lined boulevard space. So as an organization, it's going to take a lot to get to that point. However, in the 2 years, we've grown a ton, and we've already been seeing a couple wins on our side. You know, in the beginning, we weren't a formal organization. You know, this is just a neighborhood grassroots effort. So the first step was to just educate the public, show them, you know, what could be where I-35 is now. Our biggest thing right now is canvassing door to door. We're finding that a lot of Austinites are still unaware that the highway is going to be expanded, even as close as 2 blocks away from them. And almost everybody we speak to overwhelmingly supports our proposal, even if they don't know much about traffic or roadways, or even if they like driving everywhere. They still like what we're proposing much better than a highway expansion. Step 2, we have to really get local leaders on board. 2022 is a very important year for this. The mayor's office is up for election this year. Several city council members are up for re-election. There's local state races. So this year, we're really trying to push this because I-35 is going to be on the ballot. Our first step is creating a pledge in which candidates can promise to sponsor a resolution to oppose the expansion and demand a study into alternatives like Rethink 35. And we've already gotten a couple signatures already. So it's another way to show local residents which candidates they're voting for support this and which ones don't. And then number 3, we're just taking on TxDOT directly. Just last week, it was announced that we have joined a lawsuit against TxDOT. We are suing them based on their highway plans. Instead of doing a proper study into the entire project, which is being divided into 3 separate projects, they're splitting them up because that allows them to do fewer environmental studies, fewer community engagement studies with residents. So we're kind of holding their feet to the fire. If this is successful, they would be forced to merge all 3 projects into one, which would require them to do a proper environmental study and also a proper community engagement session in which we can demand that they study all alternative proposals, not just highway widenings, but any other proposal, whether it's rerouting the highway or turning it into a boulevard. This allows them to finally show us what other alternatives can be successful. Yeah, that is just a little bit about Rethink 35. We're still a very new organization, but still very quickly growing. And all these little things that we're doing is getting our name in the media, and it's also getting the expansion in the media. Because as we've said, you know, so many Austinites are still unaware that the highway they live beside is going to be doubled in size.
Thank you so much, Sean. And Scott, if you would like to tell us a bit about LID I-5.
All right, let me know when I'm good to go.
All good.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Scott T. and Sean, for your inspiring presentations, and to Lauren and Rob for hosting us at this event. As Lauren mentioned, my name is Scott, and I'm co-chair for LID I-5 in Seattle. We're an all-volunteer community group seeking to repair the damage that I-5 inflicted on our downtown and surrounding neighborhoods starting in the 1960s. This is what I-5 currently looks like, where it runs through downtown. It splits the entire length of our city in half, where it runs through here in the central area is where it encounters everything from apartments to theaters and music venues, offices, hotels, and other important features of our city. It divides areas that were redlined, and it displaced about 40,000 residents when it was built. It runs through about 20 miles of Seattle. You might know Seattle from one of our recent freeway fighting victories with the Alaskan Way Viaduct that was finally demolished in 2019 after an earthquake in 2001 damaged it. The viaduct was 6 lanes and was replaced with 4 lanes and a tunnel. And it's given us energy, and it's also shown the public what can happen when you rethink our highway infrastructure. I-5 runs through downtown parallel to where the viaduct was, about 6 blocks away to the east. So our mission as a community group since 2015 has been to simply build the case and constituency for doing something with I-5. We started as a pretty scrappy grassroots group, and 7 years later, we're really still that way. And we're really just trying to spark conversations and look at how to build a more connected and sustainable and equitable city. The project area specifically we're looking at is if anyone's familiar with downtown, it's between Madison Street and Denny Way, which is a corridor length of about 3/4 of a mile. So that's where the most energy is right now, just because it has the most population density and businesses and whatnot. But the map on the right shows some other potential areas where lidding could be done just based on topography, with some of the more recent interests happening in the University District. Just a quick snapshot of our progress to date. We've I'll mention a couple of these things as I go along. I think in 2020 was probably our most important milestone when we completed a technical feasibility study. We were able to get funding for the city of Seattle to do that and hire a consultant team and work with WashDOT, who manages the freeway. And basically the study found that the project is possible and it should be done because of the enormous benefits it could have, which was not necessarily a guaranteed outcome of the study, but definitely gave us a lot of energy and just, it answers a lot of those big questions we were getting along the way. Like, will WashDOT let you do it? How much will it cost? How long would it take to build? All those basic things were answered, and more. And some of the latest news, in March of this year, just a couple of months ago, the state legislature, partly as a result of our advocacy, dedicated funding to looking at the future of the I-5 corridor statewide. Since it's an old and crumbling freeway, it was not built up to current earthquake standards, which is one of the big drivers of our project is our seismic risk here. So we'll be looking forward to working with WashDOT on kind of setting the scope of work for that. Just last week, a state legislator joined one of our walking tours where we walked through the study area in the existing LID Park and over at I-5, which is a great kind of sign of our credibility. And we're doing some ongoing work with the city of Seattle to embed the project into the ongoing comprehensive planning and transportation planning that the city is doing as part of their public engagement processes. So I'll list 4 tools that I think are effective for freeway fighting, at least from our experience here in Seattle, and hopefully they translate well to other cities and other types of advocacy in the urban design world. First, building a broad coalition is important. So start doing that early on. There's a lot of organizations that aren't listed here, but talking to folks working in transportation and housing and parks and business, all that was important. We thought early on, try to build as big of a tent as possible. It also helps that our steering committee, myself included, has some professionals working in urban design or architecture and real estate, which both helps with their expertise, but also their connections in those various industries. And it's helpful to find volunteers and interest that way. One of the ways we got folks on board with this was to ask to go to their meetings, approach it humbly, and just ask to be a guest speaker and present the project, seek feedback early on, and that really helps. As part of that coalition building, talking about the project from a variety of angles helps. Environment, climate change, social justice, economic development, public health, quality of life, building family-friendly cities, all that was important. And we got some additional data from that feasibility study looking at some of the more specific numbers that could be possible under different live construction scenarios with different ranges of park space, amount of housing that could be built, and number of jobs that could be generated as well. And the second lesson would be to offer a variety of public engagements as you get more established. Once you get momentum, invite the media and invite your elected officials. Not everyone will say yes, but if you can get one reporter or one TV camera in the room, you have a big event, that can really help turn the tide and help spread public awareness and just help cement yourself. Some other ways we've gotten folks involved who may not have as much time as volunteers on the steering committee are just simple petitions, letter writing, sending in comments to official public processes that relate to I-5 or transportation planning. We've engaged with students at a variety of levels of education, from the kind of elementary level students who are just doing like artsy things, looking at how they would imagine their future city, to all the way up to the college level, where we've had engagement with grad students and undergrads looking at architecture and real estate implications and landscape design opportunities with letting I-5. Our coalition also includes elected officials on multiple levels of governments. We still have work to do at the county and the federal level, but we have some good connections with our city council and our state legislators. Just in general, just being professional at all times, showing patience and respect, and knowing how to summarize your project in an elevator pitch has really been helpful with this. And of course, because elected officials are constantly rotating, part of our role has also been to talk to folks who are newly in office or running for office and help make it part of the debate before folks actually get elected. Third, providing useful data has been really helpful. Just last year, we started doing some scientific public polling, and we were surprised and delighted to find that a super majority of Seattle residents support the project. And this helps not only with political connections, but also just talking to the people in general, the business community and others that we're still trying to engage with. So I think this is something that we might start the poll every year, just to kind of set it as a benchmark and see how things change over time. And it's been pretty affordable for us because we have Seattle's very politically active. We have a local think tank here who does scientific polling anyway, so we kind of just latched onto that for a fairly reasonable cost. And kind of part of that too, we took advantage of that, and we found it's kind of wonky, but we found that it made sense to latch on an additional question about the I-5 ramps downtown. And this was mid-pandemic, and we were curious what people thought about, how the commuting patterns have changed, and generally would folks be interested in changing those, because modifying some of those I-5 ramps might be important to make a more better public space in the LID project. So there we also found some support. And the last bit of data, it's also important to our elected officials and the community to know who will benefit from the project, who lives nearby, who works nearby, so that feasibility study and also our look at the census data from 2020 has been helpful, just to demonstrate that, yes, it is a diverse community. It is mostly renters. It's the most dense part of the city. And so that's just been helpful to show people that it's going to improve quality of life for people from all walks. And lastly, seeing is believing. Having lots of examples and case studies helps to make the projects look more real and show that it's not just a pie in the sky idea. For example, in the top left, in Clyde Warren Park in Dallas, Texas, is probably one of the best lit projects of recent years, and some others from around the country. It also helps to find construction photos of lit projects or freeway removal projects or whatever you're working on, just to show, these things are actually happening. One of our projects or efforts, as well as a volunteer organization, has been to track all the other LID projects across the country. So we've got I'll post the link in the chat here, but we've got a map online that identifies every single LID project that we can find, which is either built or in various stages of planning. And there's about 100 of them right now, which just shows the scale of the problem of the interstate highway system where it runs through cities, and also the opportunity to help create new public space and create new connections for people. Lastly, we developed some of our own local renderings. We were successful in getting a grant from the City of Seattle's neighborhood department to help fund a year-long design program that was a little bit more intentional than some of our kind of scrappy workshops before that. We had some teams of architects and landscape designers come up with some more realistic designs based on their expertise, and then we contracted out some renderings to really help get some eye candy for the project and just show what the real potential is. And these have been very helpful. We will definitely be using these for a long time. And other kind of separate from this, other artists and designers have produced their own images over the years, which have been helpful just to show kind of the breadth of ideas and interest. So that's the end of my presentation. And yeah, happy to take questions and continue being part of the freeway fighting movement here. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. That was really great presentations all around. Definitely learned a little bit. So now I'm going to just ask you some questions that I have about your work in the freeway fighting movement. The first one, Scott B touched on this a bit with the end of his presentation, but I was wondering what approaches have worked best for building a local and diverse coalition?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, was that Scott T or Scott B?
No, you go ahead, Scott. I'll go next.
Okay. I'll just start by saying, start by approaching other groups humbly, and just say you're asking for their advice, and like I mentioned, going to their meetings is really helpful just to latch on to some existing events that are scheduled. That really helps save everybody time. And once you do get one organization or partner endorsing your effort as part of a coalition, you can use them to kind of find other people, like ask them, who else should we be involved with here? And that kind of helps kind of spread from there fairly quickly.
Yeah, I agree with Scott, everything he's saying. The one thing that we found is when you're dealing with something that's been there so long, you need to get people to stop thinking that it has to always be there. Because in the case of ours, it was built in the late 60s, 70s. So they're just assuming it's always going to be there. And one of the things that we found that has been very helpful is instead of going in on a negative note, you go in and start talking about what the common benefits and outcomes are, whether it's walkability, whether it's generating income, affordable housing, connecting the river, climate change, all the things that generally speaking are positive, and that you can give data points for. And you can say, if we do this, we do it together. So what our group came together for was to work together to create the solution together, as opposed to come in and push a solution and try to sell a solution. It's more about the whole co-creation. So we find, just getting back to it again, it's just going in with what we're all working towards. And it's really easy to get people to buy in if they see the benefits of it. They may not know the path to it, but we can all work together to figure that out.
Awesome. And I kind of want to also build off of what Scott said. Like instead of always going negative, also being positive. One of the first things Rethink 35 started off with was just renderings of that proposed boulevard before any of the logistics were even talked about, because it's something that grabs people's attention, and it seems like people will look at it and say, wow, I'd love to live somewhere like this. Tell me more. And once you have that there, the next thing is trying to create as low a barrier of entry as possible for someone to join you. Because we're all volunteers, everyone does have day jobs, they have other things going on. So making it as easy as possible to become a volunteer And we've done that by holding a lot of community events such as webinars, because that's a way for someone who just has a passing interest from seeing us on social media can actually hear from us directly, see our faces, learn our names, and then we follow up with them directly, whether it's sending them a text or sending them a personal email. So that way they just don't hear an automated email about volunteering. They hear our name, they might remember us from the webinar or some of our in-person community events where we'll have, free soft drinks and pizza to talk to neighbors. Just an excuse for someone to talk to us one-on-one, because when you do build that personal connection with someone, they're way more willing to actually want to make the effort, with a volunteer in after work, they want to make that effort to continue working on it with us.
Excellent. And as kind of was covered a bit in your presentations, all the three of these campaigns are at a bit different stages of their life, being on when they were established up till now. And so based on that, I was just kind of wondering, how do you communicate campaign goals with different groups?
We have a here, and I see it in the other presentations too, it's a wide variety. I think Sean made a great point. You want to do it so it's a comfortable environment. But one of the things that we did in terms of getting the message out is, and we did it behind the scenes, I'd mentioned before, where before we launched, we built a robust website that asked some questions, that showed some renderings, and it had a whole area of resource of articles and case studies and everything. That it became basically a library for research for anybody that gets lost in it. It also had pages where we can show engagement, so where they could reach out to their politicians, or they could reach out to us to become part of it. So we wanted to get that really robust, and then that we consider like our foundation. And then the social media, we have some Derek, who's been a volunteer, and we're all volunteer also, just like everybody here. He's been doing a great job with doing social media to illuminate and educate and kind of keep everybody engaged so it doesn't become stale. I think it's really important. I'm sure both of these guys agree. So we've been doing that. And we've also had our public library reach out to us recently. They're going to be doing community reach outs, and we're also doing presentations constantly. And I know I'm on the screen today, but there's a dozen people that are doing it also, that are going to neighborhood organizations and doing presentations and Q&As and just informing everybody what we're talking about. And so all of those things are important. Any way you can get out there and communicate and do it in a comfortable way, we find it beneficial.
Yeah, something that our group has found over time is think about whatever organization you're talking with, try to find out what their interests are. For example, a city council member will have very different goals and interests than someone who is an environmentalist. Or even as we're door-to-door canvassing, people in different neighborhoods have different concerns. And that really just underscores the importance of having a very diverse group of people on your team. And that could be diverse from anything for different ages, people who live in different parts of the city, or people who even work in different industries or have different, experience levels. Like me personally, I don't have a ton of experience before this with, political work or advocacy. I'm more in, my background's in the tech field, but one advantage that gives me is that, I know how to speak their language. Not everybody responds to the language used by, political advocates. They, were just very dry and technical. And that's, where my personal strength is. But we have some other members of our team, some that work for law firms, or some that have worked for the government, or, lived in different neighborhoods in the city. And the more voices you have from a more diverse audience within your organization, that actually helps you, correct your language in some cases. As an example, There's another existing highway in the city that we originally talked about, oh, that could be good for I-35. And then we had some people who live in that area saying, no, that would not be good because that's a neighborhood that's increasingly becoming a neighborhood where people of color are moving to. If we move the highway there, then that would basically be repeating our mistakes of the past. And that allowed us to introspectively say, oh, that's a great point. And we caught that, before we sold that to anyone else in the community.
For communicating goals with different groups, I probably heard I'm an advocate for going to people where they are. So we have that standard presentation where we tailor it to the audience with different focuses, like was mentioned, whether we're talking to a city council member or a chamber of commerce or a housing group. We kind of have, emphasize the different aspects of the project that would be relevant to them. We also have a very robust website that explains what we're doing, who we are, has a collection of documents and archival photos. People really ask questions and how to connect with us. And we do a pretty good job of having an email newsletter and social media posts to help people engage in a variety of different ways. Just knowing there's different levels of attention span out there, and some people want the nitty gritty details. Others just want to hit like on something and let us know that they like what we're doing. So another thing we've been fairly good at as well is having friendly relations with members of the news media. Since it's such a visual project, having the renderings and the photos and taking a TV crew around to actually stand next to the highway is really compelling. And that's been great for visual media, and just having, keeping up with folks that's actually write stories about your projects is helpful. And also, like Sean mentioned, we have some members of our team who work in real estate and architecture and who have had government clients before who have worked in this space, so that they help us continue to refine our messaging, kind of fit within what's politically realistic and what will jive with the transportation department versus the city government and whatnot.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for your insights. And one more question before I turn it over to the audience Q&A. I'm wondering what's either one piece of advice or a lesson learned that you would offer to someone who's looking to start a freeway fighting campaign in their own community?
I'll start with that one. The one thing that we did, and every city is different, the politics, the chemistry of the communities, the neighborhoods. So you have to kind of realize what's going to work, for your community. So that's important to say. The reason I did that preamble is Albany is an interesting city because it is the capital of New York State, and there's a lot that goes with that's assumed. But because it is the capital, and it also has a very strong city government, and there's been a lot of change in dynamics. But the one thing that has been lacking in the past has been that real community. There's been some input, but not as much because there's so much government. It's heavy in government. And so the one thing that we decided to do because of our context in our community is we've seen a lot of projects where if someone just comes out and says and states that we're going to do this, or we're thinking about organizing it, it's something that's just being conceptualized, it gets shot down pretty quickly. It's very easy to critique something that doesn't have any data or doesn't have any visioning behind it. So in our case, it really was important to balance out the visuals. I know Scott was saying, and I agree, the visuals are really good on all these presentations, is that if you can get people excited about it, but you don't want them to naysay. You don't want to say, oh, but that looks good. We don't deserve it, or it's going to cost too much. So what we did is we balanced the left side, or the right side of the brain of stimulating it, but also we looked at all the data. So we tried not to have any weak spots, because if you don't have the research about how much acreage you're going to capture, how much potential extra square footage you're going to have, or extra revenue you're going to have for tax revenue, and you're just showing the visuals, you're gonna have a weak spot. And vice versa. If you come out and you just do data, it's not exciting. So I really got to balance it, but you got to balance it in the way that it would argue best for your community.
Something else, and I'll go on a more strategic route here, is when you're just getting started, even if you don't think you need it right away, make sure you have a suite of tools available for you to manage both you as an organization and also all of your stakeholders that you're trying to reach. Rethink 35, our main thing is our petition, which on the surface, it just shows people that this is a popular idea. But what it really does is we collect their information, their email address, their phone number, their city council district, who their representatives are, and also what their personal interests are. That's the first point of entry from them. From there, they're then on our email list. We can then reach them to volunteer. We can reach them to collect donations. So that's just the very first step of the funnel for them. And second, internally, just having some sort of task management system. We originally used Trello, but we've moved on to Asana, just so we know what tasks people within our organization are working on, whether it's making a new flyer or doing a t-shirt order or having a meeting with the city council member, just so everybody's held accountable. And, we could easily pull up a task and ask someone, hey, any update on this? Getting that started sooner rather than later, you'll definitely thank yourself for that. And in addition to that, just don't give up. It's going to be hard in the beginning. You're going to get a lot of no's. You're going to get a lot of politicians telling you, oh, that'll never work. You're going to hold public events where nobody shows up. You're going to not have money or not have donations, but just keep pushing. And also, have a team of people, even if it's small. If you're doing it by yourself, sometimes life gets busy and you're willing to put it, even if you're passionate, you might not have time for it. As long as you have a group of people who are passionate, someone will take up the reins.
What Scott P. and Sean just said definitely applied to us early on, being organized and balancing data with visual things. I would say, just to starting by asking around your community to see if there's any other interest in the idea. You can, talk to activists, urbanists, social justice groups, architects and whatnot, just to see if, maybe someone else has thought of the idea, but they don't know how to get started. Because those kind of folks are kind of the lowest hanging fruit to kind of get on board with bold city shaping visions. And then if I can get into the nitty gritty, I would advocate for, as soon as you find at least a little bit of interest in a project or a revisioning, start with an event in person as soon as you can, like a design workshop or a charrettes, or just having a walking tour, because it can really help. Just really helps exchange ideas, helps build energy, and it shows people that they're not alone and other people can show up. And then you use the lessons from that first event to help make better events down the road. But yeah, supplementing that with other low barrier things like a newsletter, webinars, whatnot, talking to people one-on-one. And something Scott said earlier about co-creation, I think is helpful as well to help kind of draw more ideas and perspectives into the project. Because as Lit I-5, we've been, I don't think I mentioned, we've been fairly neutral on what goes on top of the lid in downtown Seattle. We kind of see ourselves as the clearinghouse for ideas, and we're very open-minded. But I can say the things that definitely floated to the top have been park space, affordable housing, and civic functions, like a new community center that we don't have there. So yeah, just kind of start small and see where it goes from there. See if you can get momentum and build on that as you can.
Awesome advice all around. So I'm going to go over to some of the Q&A questions. We have a lot that are directed at specific panelists, but I think we can also open them up to all of you. This first one is directed at Scott T. And it starts with, what are some of the issues you spent time getting out in front of before launching? What would you recommend to others be prepared for before they launch something similar in their city? So Scott T, we can start with you, and then if Sean or Scott B have any insights from their own experiences, that would also be great.
Yeah, I think we may have hit on it a little bit. What we wanted to do was to get out in front of it and get some visuals. There was we have a very diverse group, but there's definitely urban planners and designers on it. And we know it's really critical to get people to see what it could be. We're very careful to say, this is not the answer. It's just something to get you to see beyond what's there, because we have such a tangled network of highways between the river and cutting off our Black and underprivileged communities that are really bad. So we want to get those visuals out there, but like I kind of mentioned before, we looked at it from how we could build using the current zoning laws. We weren't trying to reinvent the wheel. We were just saying this is what it could be using existing rules. And knowing what the data could be, we had some people that volunteered graciously to provide us analysis of income generation from tax base and job creation. And we also looked at it from a climate change standpoint. So when we were doing the website behind the scenes, we were trying to make sure we were doing all the resources, but we were also collecting data specifically for the project that we were proposing. So that way we didn't have a weak spot. And then the other thing we did is we started building our collaborative. We all tapped into, Scott alluded to, is once you tap into one or two people and they're bought into it, there's a good chance they'll know some more people. And what we wanted to do is get a diverse group that represented all of the communities, all of the economic development down to people that are citizens. And so we wanted to be really well-rounded. So before we launched, we also got some folks that are in the media to get behind us, and knowing that that was really important. So we had that, and so it was launched through the media, and it came out all at once, which was what we had hoped, and it was good.
Scott and Sean, do you have anything to add for this question?
One piece of advice I could give, and it's something that I learned, years ago with my experience in customer support, is always try to predict what they're going to ask next. When you present this plan, you're going to get skepticism and some questions commonly. Where will the traffic go? Or how will this be paid for? Or, how are you going to get local elected leaders even on board with this? And you learn that through all the time you spend talking to people. You're going to have those questions. But one little trick that I learned, because I recently helped build a FAQ page on our website for these questions we get. I've even just posed the question in our local city subreddit on Reddit, or even when sharing our petition on Nextdoor. You look at the comments and see what people are asking, because they're going to ask, you don't know who these people are, but they're going to ask you the questions that you're going to get over and over again. So even before you even really pitch the project or launch it, just try finding even online audiences. It's almost like a free focus group, because you're going to get some of the questions might be crazy, but that's representative of what you're going to find in person.
Awesome. Thanks so much for tackling that question. We have another one here, which is, can you talk about running a sustainable advocacy organization on infrastructure issues? This question is mainly asking about what is your funding structure and kind of what is the overall look of your organization?
I can start briefly. We're all volunteer here, with the exception of we had a kind of a part-time administrative staff person for a couple of years, like 8 hours a week, just to help stay organized and run newsletters and whatnot. But most of our funding comes from just individual folks making small donations. Pre-pandemic, we would have annual fundraising events where we got some bigger donors who are active in city politics or work at big engineering firms or whatnot, who our group had connections with, just to help push us forward a little bit more. But yeah, volunteer burnout definitely has been a thing. So finding a way to keep things interesting, having a drip of news or activities come out instead of doing big things at once, maybe more helpful with that aspect. But yeah, definitely, finding people who are young and energetic helps as well.
Yeah, I'll add in a little bit. Our organization is very similar to Scott's. We're all volunteer. We do have some older folks though. The one thing that the funding is actually mostly through its combination of individuals and some companies that have a vested interest in the city and what's going to happen in the future. And what we don't really have a formal structure, but one thing that we've done is when we start talking to people and talking to them about their interests, we found out what their comfort zone is and what their expertise was or what they are willing to provide. And so we don't want anybody to do something that's out of their comfort zone. They obviously believe in what we're doing, but everyone has something to give. And in an organization like this, and all three of these initiatives, let's face it, are extremely complex and there's a lot of facets to them. And so basically anybody that comes with the right energy and the right attitude and a positive attitude that it can happen, we can more than likely use whatever skill sets they have. So it's important for us to realize where we may be lacking skill sets and look for people to help along those lines. And we find that every once in a while we're recruiting and trying to tap into the community for those things that will help us in the long run.
Great, thank you so much. Looks like we're just now at 1 o'clock. If you want to stay on for a few minutes, we have a couple of very nitty-gritty questions. Otherwise, we can end it here. So it's up to you guys.
I have time to stay on for a little bit.
Me too.
Wonderful. So I'm combining these two questions are actually for you, Scott B. I'm just going to combine them. And the first one is, how has the Alaska Way Viaduct improvement worked as a case study to paint a better picture for I-5? Have there been any drawbacks to Alaska Way as a precedent? And I'm going to combine that with, how do you work specifically with Washington DOT?
Yeah, I would say the Alaska Way Viaduct, from a physical standpoint, it shows people that we don't need highways to run roughshod over our cities forever, and change is possible despite the size of highway infrastructure, despite how permanent it looks as a concrete thing. So that's been helpful, just to show people that change is possible. There were some negative aspects of that particular project with cost and schedule overruns, but which is probably not surprising for any highway project. But overall, it's helping to build a more people-friendly waterfront just a few blocks away from where I-5 is. As far as WashDOT, we started meeting with them fairly early on. We reached out, we found out who their administrative staff are, which, first of all, that's hard as well, just to get the directory and sort through who is relevant to your city. Sometimes DOTs are provided by administrative districts. They have different levels of hierarchy. But once you find the senior staff, or once we found them, we had fairly productive meetings. We've even met with the Secretary of Transportation a couple times, who I would describe as kind of arm's length supportive or positive or neutral. They're more interested in maintaining I-5 and preserving it, with this kind of lingering knowledge out there that's not really official yet, but that a major retrofit or rebuild of the project will be needed for kind of earthquake safety and longevity purposes. And I saw part of that question too, mentioned rerouting the freeway around Oklahoma City. That maybe, I don't know if Sean might be interested in answering that part.
Yeah, for I'm a little, I don't have any for that one.
Great, and then it looks like, actually that was the end of our questions, because this last one is a very nice thank you from a participant. So I will just roll into my thank you to all three of you as well for being a part of our first Freeway Fighters webinar. I really hope people got some good lessons out of this, and we're really excited for the work that you guys have been doing. There will be a recording of this available starting tomorrow, and we look forward to seeing most of you again next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Yes, thank you.